I was standing in my garage at 6 in the morning when I heard the distinctive rumble of my commercial-grade snowblower starting up outside, which would have been perfectly normal except for one small problem. I wasn't the one operating it. The blizzard had hit Boulder, Colorado harder than anyone expected. Weather forecasters had predicted 6 inches, maybe 8 if we were unlucky. Instead, we got nearly 2 feet overnight with another foot expected before noon. The streets looked like something out of an Arctic documentary, and the wind was whipping snow around so hard you could barely see 20 feet in front of you. I threw on my boots and winter coat, rushing out into the freezing cold just in time to see Patricia Henderson, president of our Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association, hauling my bright red commercial snowblower down my driveway. The thing was a beast, a Honda HSS 1332 ATD that I'd purchased specifically because it was registered as emergency equipment with the Boulder Fire Department. I was a volunteer firefighter, and that machine was designated for emergency response during severe weather events. Patricia. I shouted over the howling wind. "What the hell are you doing with my equipment?" She turned around, her face pinched with that expression of righteous indignation that had become her trademark in the 3 years since she'd taken over the HOA. Patricia was 52, wore her blonde hair in a severe bob, and had a collection of Christmas sweaters that would make anyone's eyes water. Today's featured a bedazzled snowman that probably cost more than most people's heating bills. "Zachary Zimmerman, this snowblower is being confiscated under HOA emergency protocols," she announced, as if this was the most reasonable thing in the world. "Your driveway hasn't been cleared within the required 2-hour window after snowfall cessation. The snow is still falling." I gestured wildly at the white curtain surrounding us. "And that's not HOA property, that's my personal equipment registered with the fire department." According to Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaws, any equipment that can be used for the common good during an emergency can be temporarily requisitioned by the HOA board, she recited, pulling out a laminated card from her coat pocket. I couldn't believe she actually carried that thing around. "That's not even a real bylaw," I said, my breath creating white clouds in the frigid air. "I was at the meeting when we voted on emergency protocols. That was about using the community center as a shelter, not stealing people's private property." "It's not stealing, it's temporary requisition," Patricia corrected, her voice taking on that condescending tone that made everyone in the neighborhood want to scream. "And I'm president of the HOA, which means I have the authority to interpret the bylaws as needed during emergencies. Give me back my snowblower, Patricia." "No." She actually turned her back on me and continued dragging the machine down the driveway. "I need this to clear the sidewalks near the community mailboxes. It's an HOA priority." I pulled out my phone and dialed the non-emergency line for the fire department. My captain, Mike Torres, answered on the 3rd ring. "Zimmerman, you better be calling because you're on your way in," he said. "This storm is causing chaos all over the county." "Actually, Cap, I've got a situation. HOA president just stole the department's registered snowblower, the one we use for emergency access routes." There was a long pause. "She did what?" "Patricia Henderson. She's dragging it down my driveway right now claiming some fake HOA bylaw gives her the right to requisition it." "That's department property, Zach." "Well, technically it's registered to the department even if you own it. Is she still there?" "Yeah, she's trying to get it over the curb. Keep her there. I'm sending someone over. We need that equipment for actual emergencies, not clearing paths to mailboxes." I hung up and jogged after Patricia, who had managed to get the snowblower onto the sidewalk and was now attempting to start it up again. She'd stalled it trying to get over the curb. "Fire department is sending someone over," I told her. "You need to leave that alone." "The fire department has no jurisdiction over HOA matters," Patricia said, yanking the starter cord. The engine coughed but didn't catch. "This is a community issue. It's registered emergency equipment. That makes it their jurisdiction." "I don't care if it's registered to the President of the United States. The HOA bylaws are very clear about community obligations during weather emergencies, and I'm enforcing them." My neighbor, Gerald Prescott, came trudging out of his house across the street. He was in his late 60s, retired from teaching, and had been complaining about Patricia's increasingly authoritarian HOA leadership for months. "Is she seriously taking your snowblower, Zach? Apparently the HOA has requisition powers now," I called back. Gerald waded through the knee-deep snow until he reached the sidewalk. "Patricia, this is insane. You can't just take people's property." "Gerald, your driveway also hasn't been cleared," Patricia said, not even looking up from her attempts to restart the snowblower. "You're in violation as well. Consider this a formal warning. It's still snowing. How are we supposed to clear driveways when the snow is actively falling?" "That's not my problem. The bylaws clearly state 2 hours after cessation of snowfall, which hasn't happened." Gerald looked like he wanted to throw something. I didn't blame him. The sound of a fire department SUV's chains clanking through the snow made us all turn. Captain Torres himself had come, which surprised me. He pulled up to the curb and climbed out, a mountain of a man in his full firefighter gear. "Madam, I'm going to need you to step away from that equipment," Torres said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from 20 years of running into burning buildings. Patricia straightened up, and I could see her mentally preparing for battle. "And who are you?" "Captain Mike Torres, Boulder Fire Department. That snowblower is registered as emergency response equipment. You're interfering with fire department operations during a declared weather emergency." "This is an HOA matter," Patricia insisted. "You have no authority here." Torres pulled out his phone and showed her something on the screen. "See this? That's the registration for this specific piece of equipment, serial number and all. It's designated for emergency access route clearance during severe weather events. Boulder County is currently under a Level 2 snow emergency. That means this equipment needs to be available for its designated purpose." "Which is clearing snow," Patricia said triumphantly. "That's exactly what I'm doing." "No, madam. Its designated purpose is clearing emergency access routes to ensure fire, medical, and police services can reach residents, not clearing paths to mailboxes. The community mailboxes are a priority." "They're really not," Torres said flatly. "Now step away from the equipment." Patricia's face was turning red, which was quite a sight against the white backdrop of the blizzard. "I am the president of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA, and I'm telling you that this is an internal community matter. Unless you have a warrant or some other legal documentation, you can't just take this snowblower." "I don't need to take it," Torres said. "It's not going anywhere without Mr. Zimmerman's permission since he owns it. But I am informing you that if you attempt to remove it from this location, you'll be interfering with emergency services, which is a Class 2 misdemeanor in Colorado." "You're threatening me." "I'm informing you of the law, madam," my phone buzzed. It was a text from another neighbor, Linda Martinez, asking what was going on. Apparently, the gathering crowd of me, Gerald, Patricia, and now Captain Torres was attracting attention even in the middle of a blizzard. I texted back a quick explanation and watched as Linda's living room curtains twitched. "Fine," Patricia said, her voice tight with anger. "But Zachary is still in violation of HOA bylaws regarding snow clearance, and he'll be receiving a fine. $200 for failure to maintain property standards during inclement weather. Send me the fine, I said, too tired to argue anymore. I'll see you at the next HOA meeting where we can discuss how you don't actually have the authority to issue fines during active snowstorms. We'll see about that. Patricia turned on her heel and marched back toward her house, which was 3 doors down. Her own driveway, I noticed, was only partially cleared. Torres waited until she was out of earshot before shaking his head. That woman is something else. You okay here, Zimmerman? Yeah, Cap. Thanks for coming out. We need you and that snowblower at the station within the hour if possible. There's an elderly couple on Spruce Street whose heat went out and the repair guy can't get through. We need to clear a path. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Torres nodded and climbed back into his SUV, disappearing into the white chaos of the storm. Gerald was still standing on the sidewalk, looking dumbfounded. She's completely lost it, he said. The HOA was never supposed to be like this. We started it to maintain property values and organize neighborhood events, not to become some kind of fascist microstate. I know, I said, starting up the snowblower. But right now I need to get this to the fire station. Can you check on the Hendersons on Maple? Not Patricia, the other Hendersons. Tom and Sarah. Make sure they're doing okay. On it. Gerald trudged back toward his house to get his own shovel and supplies. I spent the next 20 minutes clearing a path down my driveway and out onto the street, then loaded the snowblower into the back of my truck. It was heavy work, even with the ramps, but I'd done it dozens of times before. By the time I finished, I was sweating despite the single-digit temperatures. The drive to the fire station took 3 times longer than normal. The roads were a mess, and even with 4-wheel drive and snow tires, I was sliding around like everyone else. When I finally pulled into the station, Torres was waiting with 2 other firefighters, Dan Kowalski and Jennifer Hart. Zimmerman, perfect timing, Torres said. Jennifer's going with you to the Spruce Street location. Dan and I are taking the department's backup equipment to clear routes near the hospital. Jennifer nodded at me as she climbed into my truck. She was relatively new to the station, only about 6 months in, but she was competent and didn't waste time with small talk, which I appreciated. What's the situation on Spruce? I asked as we headed out. Harold and Ethel Cunningham, both in their 80s. Their furnace died around 4 this morning. Repair company can't get anyone out until the road's clear, which could be this afternoon at the earliest. The cold is getting dangerous for them. Can't we just bring them to the shelter at the community center? Harold's on oxygen. The portable tank isn't reliable enough for transport in this weather. Better to fix the heat problem where they are. We drove in focused silence, the snow still coming down in sheets. Spruce Street was in an older part of Boulder, with narrower roads and houses packed more tightly together. Several cars had been abandoned on the street, their shapes barely visible under the fresh snow. When we reached the Cunningham house, the snow had drifted up to the windows on one side. I unloaded the snowblower and started cutting a path from the street to their front door while Jennifer radioed back to the station with our status. It took 45 minutes to clear enough space for the repair truck to access the house once the roads were passable. By the time we finished, I could barely feel my fingers, and my face felt like it had been sandblasted. But the look of relief on Ethel Cunningham's face when she opened the door made it worth it. "Thank you so much," she said, ushering us inside briefly to warm up. Harold was getting so cold. I kept putting blankets on him, but it wasn't enough. "The repair company should be able to get here within a few hours," Jennifer assured her. "In the meantime, we've left some heat packs and instructions for safe use of your gas stove to keep the temperature up. Don't use your oven for heat, understand? Just the stovetop with proper ventilation." "I understand," Ethel said. "You two are angels." We weren't angels. We were just people doing our jobs, but I appreciated the sentiment. The rest of the morning was spent clearing emergency access routes throughout Boulder. We helped create paths for 3 ambulances, 2 police vehicles, and cleared the area around a fire hydrant that had been completely buried. By noon, the snow had finally stopped, and the sun was trying to break through the clouds. My phone had been buzzing periodically throughout the morning, but I'd ignored it. When Jennifer and I finally took a break back at the station, I checked my messages. I had 17 texts and 6 missed calls, most from neighbors in Meadowbrook Hills. The situation, as I pieced it together from the increasingly frantic messages, was that Patricia had spent the morning going door to door issuing snow clearance violations to nearly every house in the neighborhood. She'd apparently printed out official-looking citations with fine amounts ranging from $100 to $300, depending on how much she felt each person had violated the bylaws. The last message was from Gerald. "Emergency HOA meeting called for tonight at 7 p.m. Patricia's out of control. We need you there. Torres found me in the break room staring at my phone. What's wrong?" "My HOA president is having a meltdown," I said, showing him some of the messages. "She's fining everyone in the neighborhood for not clearing snow during an active blizzard." "The same woman who tried to steal your snowblower this morning, the very same." Torres shook his head. "HOAs can be useful, but some people get a little bit of power and completely lose their minds. You need to head home, if that's okay. I know we might get more calls." "We're in decent shape now. Roads are starting to clear and the county plows are making progress. Take your equipment home and get some rest. If we need you, we'll call." I thanked him and loaded the snowblower back into my truck. The drive home was significantly easier than the morning's white-knuckle adventure. The sun was fully out now, and the temperature had climbed to a balmy 20 degrees. The snowplows had been through at least once on the main roads, leaving them slushy but passable. When I pulled into Meadowbrook Hills, I saw exactly what the text had described. Nearly every house had one of Patricia's official-looking violation notices stuck to their front door. They were printed on bright yellow paper, impossible to miss. I parked in my driveway and walked over to my own door, where, sure enough, a notice was waiting. The document was actually impressive in its absurdity. It had the HOA logo at the top, multiple citations of bylaw violations, and a fine amount of $250. I was required to pay within 10 days or face additional penalties, including possible legal action. I took a photo of it and sent it to my lawyer friend, Marcus Green. He texted back within minutes. "This is garbage. She has no authority to issue fines without a board vote. Come by tomorrow, and we'll discuss." The emergency HOA meeting was being held at Gerald's house, since no one wanted to give Patricia the home court advantage of hosting it herself. By 6:30, people were already arriving, trudging through the snow with the kind of determined anger that comes from being pushed too far. I showed up at 6:45. Gerald's living room was packed with at least 30 people, which was remarkable considering our HOA only had 45 houses total. That meant 2/3 of the neighborhood had shown up, most of them clutching yellow violation notices. Patricia arrived at exactly 7, flanked by the other 2 board members, Susan Walsh and Thomas Brennan. Susan looked uncomfortable, while Thomas seemed confused about why everyone was so upset. Patricia, on the other hand, looked like she was preparing to address her loyal subjects. "This meeting will come to order," Patricia announced, not bothering to sit down. I understand there are concerns about the enforcement actions taken today, but I want to assure everyone that every citation was issued in accordance with established HOA bylaws. What established bylaws? Linda Martinez called out from the back. I've lived here for 12 years, and I've never heard of any rule requiring snow clearance within 2 hours during an active blizzard. The bylaws regarding property maintenance clearly state that homeowners are responsible for keeping their properties in acceptable condition, Patricia said, pulling out her phone and scrolling through something. Section 8, Paragraph 2 specifically mentions sidewalks and driveways must be maintained. Maintained, yes, Gerald said, standing up. But there's nothing about timeframes during active weather events. You know why? Because we specifically discussed that during the bylaw revision 3 years ago and agreed it was unreasonable. The board has the authority to interpret the bylaws as needed to maintain community standards, Patricia insisted. The board has 3 members, Susan Walsh said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She cleared her throat and spoke louder. Patricia, we talked about this. You were supposed to consult with Thomas and me before taking any enforcement action. You didn't. You just printed these citations and started handing them out. I'm the president. I have the authority to act decisively during emergencies. You don't actually, I said, standing up. I spoke with my lawyer this afternoon. The HOA bylaws require a majority board vote for any fine or penalty over $50. You issued fines ranging from $100 to $300 without consulting anyone. That's incorrect, Patricia said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. I pulled out my phone and started reading from Marcus's text. Per Colorado Revised Statutes, Title 38, Article 33.3, homeowners associations must follow their own governing documents when issuing fines or penalties. Our governing documents, which I have a copy of, clearly state that fines over $50 require a majority board vote. Single board members cannot unilaterally issue such penalties. The room was completely silent. Patricia's face had gone from red to pale. Furthermore, I continued, you attempted to confiscate registered emergency equipment this morning during a declared Level 2 snow emergency. That's interference with emergency services, which is a misdemeanor under Colorado law. I was trying to help the community, Patricia said, and for the first time, I heard a tremor in her voice. By stealing equipment needed for actual emergencies. By fining people for not clearing snow that was actively falling. Patricia, what happened to you? You used to be reasonable. Susan stood up. I think we need to have a serious discussion about the board's direction. Patricia, I'm making a motion to void all citations issued today as they were done without proper board authorization. I second that, Thomas said immediately. You can't just void them, Patricia protested. We can and we are, Susan said firmly. All in favor. Every hand in the room shot up. Motion carries, Gerald said. Patricia, those citations are void. You need to notify everyone formally. Patricia looked around the room, seeming to realize for the first time just how isolated she'd become. I was just trying to maintain our property values. If we let standards slip, the whole neighborhood suffers. There's a difference between maintaining standards and tyranny, Linda said. You've been getting worse for months. The fine for leaving trash cans out 15 minutes too long, the citations for having the wrong shade of white trim, the attempted ban on any vehicle over 10 years old. It's too much. I move that we hold an immediate vote of no confidence in Patricia Henderson as HOA president, Gerald said. Seconded, at least 5 people said simultaneously. You can't do this, Patricia said, her voice rising. I'm elected for a 2-year term. And the bylaws also allow for removal with a 2/3 vote of homeowners present at a properly called meeting, Gerald said. This is a properly called emergency meeting. Everyone here is a homeowner. Let's vote. The vote wasn't even close. 34 voted for removal, 2 voted against, and 1 abstention. Patricia stood there in shocked silence as the reality sank in. "This meeting is over," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned and walked out, not even waiting for Susan and Thomas. The room erupted in conversation as soon as she left. Susan took charge, suggesting we table any further HOA business until we could hold a proper election for a new president. Everyone agreed, too exhausted from the drama and the storm to deal with anything else. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I got a call from Captain Torres. "Zimmerman, you need to get down to the station. We've got a situation involving your HOA president." "Former president," I corrected. "What kind of situation?" "Just get here." When I arrived, I found Patricia Henderson sitting in the station's small meeting room, looking defiant despite clearly having been crying. Torres pulled me aside before I went in. "She filed a formal complaint claiming the fire department conspired with you to undermine her authority and steal HOA property," Torres said. "She's demanding we return the snowblower to her and pay for damages to her reputation." "You're kidding." I wish I was. "She showed up here an hour ago with a lawyer and everything. The lawyer took one look at the registration documents and left, but she's still here insisting we take her seriously." "What do you need from me?" "I need you to formally confirm that the snowblower is your property, registered voluntarily with the department, and that you did not give Patricia Henderson or the HOA permission to use it. I need it on the record." We went through the formal statement process, which took about 20 minutes. Patricia sat in the corner the entire time, occasionally muttering things like conspiracy and corruption. When we finished, Torres escorted her out. "Madam, you need to leave now," he told her. "If you come back here making false claims, we'll have to consider it harassment." "This isn't over," Patricia said. "I'll take this to the city council, the county commissioners, whoever will listen. You all conspired to humiliate me and destroy my ability to serve my community." "You destroyed that yourself," I said, immediately regretting engaging with her. She whirled on me. "You've wanted me gone from the beginning. You and Gerald and all the others who don't care about property values or community standards. Well, I have news for you. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to prove that I was wrongfully removed and that you all violated my rights." "You don't have a right to steal people's property," Torres said flatly. "Now leave." Patricia stormed out and I heard her car start a moment later. "She's going to be a problem," Torres said. He was right. Over the next week, Patricia launched what could only be described as a campaign of vindication. She sent certified letters to every homeowner in Meadowbrook Hills, claiming she'd been illegally removed and that all actions taken after her removal were void. She filed complaints with the city, the county, and even tried to get the state HOA Oversight Board involved. The problem was that the state board actually did get involved, just not the way Patricia wanted. They reviewed the complaint, looked at the evidence of her unauthorized citations and attempted equipment theft, and sent an investigator. The investigator, a woman named Rachel Kim, spent 2 days in Boulder interviewing homeowners, reviewing HOA documents, and examining Patricia's actions. I was one of the people she interviewed. "Walk me through the morning of the storm," she said, her recorder running. I explained the whole thing. Waking up to find Patricia stealing my snowblower, her claims about HOA requisition authority, Captain Torres's intervention, and her subsequent citation spree. And you're certain the snowblower was registered with the fire department before this incident? Rachel asked. I have the registration documents dated from 2 years ago. It's always been registered. That's why I bought that particular model. It meets the department's specifications for emergency response equipment. Rachel made notes. And the citations she issued, they were all voided. At the emergency meeting, yes. 2 of the 3 board members voted to void them, and the homeowners voted to remove Patricia as president, which was within the HOA's legal rights according to your bylaws, Rachel said. Okay, I think I have what I need. 3 weeks later, we received the state board's findings. Patricia had violated multiple provisions of Colorado HOA law, including unauthorized enforcement actions, failure to follow proper board procedures, and attempted theft of property. The board recommended she be permanently barred from serving on any HOA board in Colorado, and that she be required to take a course on HOA governance before being allowed to participate in board elections, even as a voter. Patricia responded by suing the HOA, me personally, the fire department, and Captain Torres. The lawsuit was a rambling mess that claimed everything from conspiracy to defamation to violation of her civil rights. Marcus took one look at it and started laughing. This is the most frivolous thing I've seen in 5 years, he said. She's going to get sanctioned by the judge for wasting the court's time. He was almost right. The judge didn't sanction her, but he did dismiss every single claim with prejudice, meaning she couldn't refile. He also ordered her to pay attorney's fees for all defendants, which came to about $25,000 total. That's when Patricia finally snapped. I was home on a Saturday afternoon in early March when Gerald called me, panic in his voice. Zach, you need to get over here. Patricia's at my house screaming about conspiracies, and she has a baseball bat. I called 911 while running to my truck. The dispatcher kept me on the line as I drove the 3 houses down to Gerald's place. I could hear Patricia before I saw her. You destroyed my life. She was screaming. All of you. You conspired to humiliate me and ruin everything I worked for. She was standing in Gerald's front yard, wielding an aluminum baseball bat and smashing his mailbox to pieces. Gerald was on his porch, his wife Dorothy behind him, both looking terrified. Patricia, put the bat down, I said, staying near my truck. She spun toward me. This is all your fault. If you hadn't called the fire department, none of this would have happened. I'd still be president, I wouldn't owe thousands of dollars, and people would still respect me. You stole my property. What did you expect me to do? It was for the community. Everything I did was for the community. She took a swing at Gerald's porch railing, leaving a dent in the wood. But none of you appreciated it. You all just wanted to tear me down. Sirens were getting closer. Patricia heard them too and seemed to realize the situation she was in. She looked at the bat in her hands like she was seeing it for the first time. I was a good president, she said, her voice cracking. I kept property values up. I enforced the rules. Why wasn't that enough? Because you forgot that people live here, Gerald said gently. We're not just property values and rules. We're a community of real people trying to live our lives. 2 Boulder police cruisers pulled up, officers emerging with hands on their weapons but not drawn. Madam, put the bat down, one of them commanded. Patricia looked at the officers, then at the bat, then at the wreckage of Gerald's mailbox. She dropped the bat and sank to her knees in the melting snow. I just wanted things to be nice, she whispered. They arrested her for criminal mischief and menacing. Gerald declined to press charges for the property damage, but the district attorney moved forward with the menacing charge since she'd threatened people with a weapon. She ended up pleading guilty to misdemeanor menacing and was sentenced to anger management classes, community service, and probation. The HOA held elections in April. Susan Walsh was elected president, and 2 new board members joined her. Their first official act was to revise the enforcement procedures to require board consensus on any fine or violation notice, with clear guidelines about what constituted a violation and what didn't. Their second act was to organize a neighborhood cleanup day, which Patricia would have hated because it involved people parking utility trailers on the street and playing music too loud. But it was fun, and it reminded everyone why we'd wanted an HOA in the first place. To build community, not control it. I kept the snowblower registered with the fire department. That winter, we had 2 more major storms, and both times I was able to help clear emergency access routes. Captain Torres joked that my snowblower had more emergency responses than some of the firefighters. Patricia sold her house in July and moved to Denver. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she'd sworn off HOAs entirely and bought a condo where the association was managed by a professional company. I hope she found some peace. The yellow citation notices became a running joke in Meadowbrook Hills. Someone made T-shirts with "Survived the Great HOA Blizzard Crisis" printed on them. Gerald framed his citation and hung it in his garage. Linda started a tradition of having a Blizzard Day party every February, celebrating with food and games and stories about the craziest HOA moments we'd all experienced. One evening in late September, I was sitting on my porch watching the sun set over the Rocky Mountains when Susan walked over. She'd become a good president, balancing the need for community standards with actual human reasonableness. "Hey, Zach, got a minute?" she asked. "Sure, what's up?" "I wanted to thank you, actually, for standing up to Patricia back during the storm. If you hadn't pushed back, if you just let her take the snowblower and issue all those citations, I don't think the rest of us would have found the courage to do anything about it." "I just didn't want my equipment stolen," I said with a laugh. "It was more than that. You reminded us that HOAs are supposed to serve homeowners, not the other way around. That might seem obvious, but it's easy to forget when someone with a strong personality takes charge and starts making it seem like their way is the only way." "How are things going with the new board?" "Good. Really good, actually. We've gotten more people involved, we're making decisions together, and nobody's threatening to confiscate anyone's property." She smiled. "The bar is low, but we're clearing it." After she left, I thought about the whole bizarre situation. A snowblower theft during a blizzard had exposed deep problems in our HOA and ultimately led to positive changes. Patricia had seen herself as a crusader for community standards, but she'd lost sight of the community itself. In her mind, the rules had become more important than the people the rules were meant to serve. The fire department had their annual recognition dinner in October. Captain Torres presented me with a plaque thanking me for my volunteer service during the previous year's emergency responses. He made sure to mention the infamous snowblower incident in his speech, which got a huge laugh from everyone who'd heard the story. "Zimmerman here taught us an important lesson," Torres said. "Sometimes the biggest emergencies aren't fires or medical calls. Sometimes they're people forgetting that we're all in this together, and we need folks willing to stand up and remind us of that." So here's to Zach, his mysteriously attractive snowblower, and to never letting HOA presidents think they run the fire department. The room erupted in applause and laughter. Jennifer Hart, who'd helped me clear the Cunninghams' driveway that morning, caught my eye and raised her glass in a toast. I thought about Harold and Ethel Cunningham, who'd been able to stay safely in their home because we'd been able to get emergency services to them. I thought about all the other people we'd helped that day and in the storm since. That's what the snowblower was for. That's what community was supposed to be about, not perfect lawns and identical mailboxes and citations for minor violations, but people helping people, especially when times got tough. Gerald hosted Thanksgiving that year and invited half the neighborhood. It was chaotic and loud and wonderful. Kids ran around while adults talked and laughed, and nobody worried about whether their cars were parked at exactly the right angle or whether their holiday decorations matched the approved HOA color scheme. Thomas Brennan, one of the former board members who'd served with Patricia, pulled me aside during dessert. "You know, I feel terrible about not standing up to her sooner," he admitted. "I saw her getting more extreme, but I told myself it was just her being thorough. I should have said something." "You voted to void the citations when it mattered," I reminded him. "That took courage too, I guess. I just keep thinking about how close we came to becoming one of those nightmare HOAs you read about online, where they fine people for having the wrong color roses or ban children from playing outside. But we didn't become that. The system worked. People spoke up, we followed the rules for removing her, and we made changes to prevent it from happening again." "Thanks to your snowblower," Thomas said with a laugh. "Thanks to a lot of people who cared enough to push back," I corrected. "My parents came to visit in December, right before Christmas. My mom couldn't believe the story when I told her about it." "She tried to steal your snowblower during a blizzard," Mom asked, shaking her head. "What on earth was she thinking?" "That she had unlimited authority as HOA president," I said, "and that rules mattered more than people." "Well, I'm glad you stood up to her. Your father and I raised you to stand up for what's right." Dad was more interested in seeing the famous snowblower. I showed him the registration documents and explained how the fire department system worked. "Smart program," he said. "Gets extra equipment for emergencies without the department having to pay for it all, and homeowners get to feel like they're contributing. It's worked out pretty well, except when HOA presidents try to requisition it for clearing paths to mailboxes." "That woman was something else," Dad said. "But you handled it right. Stood your ground, followed the proper channels, didn't escalate unnecessarily. I'm proud of you, son." Coming from Dad, who'd been a Marine before becoming a high school teacher, that meant a lot. January brought another winter storm, though not as severe as the previous year's blizzard. I was out clearing my driveway when the new neighbor who'd bought Patricia's old house came over to introduce himself. "Hi, I'm Robert Chen," he said, extending a hand. "Just moved in last week." "Zach Zimmerman. Welcome to the neighborhood." "Thanks. Hey, I heard there was some HOA drama last year involving the previous owner of my house." I gave him the abbreviated version of the story. His eyes got wider with each detail. "Wow," he said when I finished. "And here I was worried about HOA restrictions on fence colors. That's intense." "The current board is much more reasonable," I assured him. "Susan Walsh is president now. She's good people." "That's a relief. My last neighborhood didn't have an HOA and it was chaos. People parking RVs in their front yards, houses painted fluorescent colors, that kind of thing. I was hoping for some reasonable middle ground. That's what we've got now. Common sense rules, enforced reasonably with actual community involvement in decisions." "Sounds perfect." He glanced at my snowblower. "Is that the famous snowblower from the story?" "This is it. The Honda that launched 1,000 HOA reforms." Robert laughed. "Mind if I take a picture? My wife is never going to believe this story without evidence." I posed with the snowblower while he took a photo. As weird as it was to have my equipment become a neighborhood legend, I had to admit it made for a good story. The HOA held its annual meeting in February. The turnout was the highest in the neighborhood's history, with representatives from 42 of the 45 houses. Susan presented the previous year's financials. which showed we'd actually saved money by not printing endless violation notices. We issued a total of 3 formal violations last year, Susan reported. One for a homeowner who left a broken-down car in their driveway for 6 months. One for someone who painted their house bright purple without architectural approval. And one for a homeowner who installed a 7-foot fence in their front yard, despite the bylaws specifying 4 feet maximum. What happened with those violations? Someone asked. In all 3 cases, we contacted the homeowners, explained the issue, and worked with them to find solutions. The broken car got removed, the purple house got repainted in an acceptable color, and the too tall fence was modified to meet standards. No fines, no threats, just communication and cooperation. The contrast with Patricia's reign of yellow citations couldn't have been clearer. I'd like to propose something. Gerald stood up. I think we should formally document what happened last year, not as a way to shame anyone, but as a cautionary tale for future boards, so we never forget what happens when people lose sight of why HOAs exist. The motion passed unanimously. Linda volunteered to write it up, and 2 months later, every homeowner received a document titled Lessons from the Blizzard, HOA Governance and Community Values. It was fair and factual, didn't name Patricia specifically, and laid out clear principles for future HOA leadership. Marcus called me after reading his copy. "This is actually impressive," he said. "Most HOAs never learn from their mistakes. You all documented yours and turned it into policy. I'm going to share this with some of my other HOA clients." "Feel free," I said. "If it helps other neighborhoods avoid similar problems, that's great." Spring brought the neighborhood cleanup day again. This time Robert and his wife Jennifer came, along with their 2 kids. Watching them integrate into the community, seeing people work together on improving shared spaces without anyone barking orders or issuing citations, felt like validation of everything we'd fought for. Susan found me picking up litter along the walking path. "You know what I realized," she said. Patricia wasn't entirely wrong. Communities do need standards and people willing to enforce them. She just forgot that enforcement should be the last resort, not the first response, and that the goal is helping the community thrive, not punishing people for minor infractions. "That's pretty philosophical for a cleanup day," I teased. "I've been thinking about it a lot. Taking over as president, I wanted to make sure I didn't overcorrect and become too lax, but I also didn't want to turn into Patricia. Finding that balance has been interesting." "From what I can see, you're doing great." "We're doing great," she corrected. "This only works because people stay involved and speak up. You taught us that." I thought about correcting her, explaining that all I'd done was refuse to let someone steal my property. But maybe it had been more than that. Maybe standing up at that first moment, insisting on what was right despite Patricia's bluster about authority and bylaws, had set an example that others followed. Or maybe I was overthinking it, and it really was just about a snowblower. The fire department got a new piece of equipment in June, a state-of-the-art snow removal machine that made my Honda look like a toy. Captain Torres called me down to the station to check it out. "Does this mean my snowblower is retired?" I asked, examining the impressive new machine. "Not at all. We're building out the volunteer equipment registry. Yours was the first, and it proved the concept works. Now we're getting more volunteers to register equipment. Snowblowers, generators, even a few ADVs for rough terrain response." "Your stand against the HOA president actually helped make this happen." "How so?" "When you stood your ground about the registration and we backed you up, it got attention. The county commissioners heard about it, realized we were running an effective volunteer equipment program on a shoestring budget, and allocated funds for support equipment. So this new machine, plus stipends for volunteers who register equipment, that's all thanks to a bureaucratic nightmare and your unwillingness to let an HOA president bully you. I hadn't thought about the broader implications, but it made sense. Sometimes standing up about small things led to bigger changes. My girlfriend Gabriella Stevens moved in with me in August. She'd heard the snowblower story on our second date and thought I was exaggerating. Then she met Gerald at a neighborhood barbecue, and he confirmed every detail. "I still can't believe this happened," Gabriella said one evening as we sat on the porch. "I've dealt with difficult HOAs before, but stealing emergency equipment during a blizzard is next level." "Patricia convinced herself she was doing the right thing," I said. "That's what made it so frustrating. She genuinely believed she was helping." "The road to hell is paved with good intentions," Gabriella quoted. "Did you ever hear from her after she moved?" "No. I hope she's doing better, honestly. I didn't want to ruin her life, I just wanted my snowblower back." "You're too nice. She tried to steal from you, issued fake fines, and ended up smashing your neighbor's mailbox with a baseball bat. And she got consequences for all of it. The legal system worked, the HOA system worked, and the community is better for it. Holding a grudge wouldn't accomplish anything." Gabriella leaned her head on my shoulder. "This is why I love you. You stand up for what's right, but you don't turn it into a personal vendetta." That made me think. Had I ever been in danger of taking it too personally? There were moments during the legal proceedings when I'd been angry, frustrated by Patricia's refusal to see reason. But mostly, I just wanted the situation resolved so everyone could move on. The 1-year anniversary of the blizzard fell on a Tuesday. The weather was clear and cold, nothing like the previous year's chaos. Linda organized an impromptu gathering at her house that evening, inviting everyone who'd been involved in the drama. Gerald raised his glass in a toast. To surviving HOA tyranny, to snowblowers that became symbols of resistance, and to never forgetting that communities are made of people, not rules. We all drank to that. Later, as people were sharing their favorite moments from the saga, Dorothy brought up something I'd forgotten. "Remember when Patricia tried to claim the fire department was conspiring against her? She actually used the word conspiracy in official documents." "The investigator loved that part," Susan said. "She told me it was the clearest case of HOA overreach she'd encountered in 5 years. Usually it's more subtle, harder to prove, but Patricia documented everything, including her own violations." "She was thorough," Thomas said. "I'll give her that. Completely wrong, but thorough." Jennifer Hart from the fire department had also been invited. "You know what I remember most from that day," she said. "How calm Zach stayed through the whole thing. Patricia was screaming about authority and requisitions, and he just calmly called the captain and waited for backup. That's proper emergency response procedure. Assess the situation, call for appropriate help, don't escalate unnecessarily." "I was plenty stressed on the inside," I admitted. "But yeah, escalating wouldn't have helped. It would have given her ammunition," Marcus pointed out. He'd also made it to the gathering, curious to see the neighborhood that had generated such an entertaining legal case. "If you'd grabbed the snowblower back or gotten into a physical confrontation, she could have claimed you were the aggressor. Instead, you documented everything, followed proper procedures, and let the system work." "The system doesn't always work, though," Robert said. "I've heard horror stories about HOAs ruining people's lives, and there's no recourse because state laws favor the associations." "That's changing in Colorado," Marcus said. "Cases like this one, where clear overreach gets documented and punished, help build precedent. The state board is getting better at holding bad HOA leadership accountable." The conversation drifted to other topics, but I found myself reflecting on the whole experience. One snowblower theft during a blizzard had led to HOA reforms, improved fire department programs, stricter state oversight of HOA boards, and a stronger sense of community in Meadowbrook Hills. All because I'd refused to let someone take my property without permission. Or maybe that was too simple. Maybe it was because enough people recognized when authority had gone too far and were willing to speak up. Maybe it was because we had systems in place, bylaws and procedures and state oversight that could be activated when someone violated them. Maybe it was because we believed communities should serve people, not the other way around. December brought another significant snowstorm, though still not as bad as the legendary blizzard. This time, I was prepared and helping clear emergency routes before dawn. The new fire department equipment worked beautifully, and the expanded volunteer program meant we had coverage across the whole county. Susan called me mid-morning. "Hey, I hate to bother you while you're on fire department duty, but we've got a situation developing with a homeowner who's demanding the HOA clear everyone's driveways. I wanted to ask your advice before responding." "Who's demanding that?" "New guy, moved in 3 months ago. He's threatening to sue the HOA for not providing snow removal services." "Are snow removal services mentioned anywhere in the HOA documents?" "Nope, never have been. Each homeowner is responsible for their own property." "Then tell him to hire a snow removal service like everyone else. If he pushes back, refer him to the HOA attorney." "That's what I thought. I just wanted to check with you because, well, you're kind of the HOA drama expert now." I laughed. "I really hope that's not my legacy." "Too late. You're the guy who stood up to a tyrant with a snowblower. That's going in the neighborhood history books." After we hung up, I thought about how weird it was that one incident had defined me in the community's eyes. I'd lived in Meadowbrook Hills for 8 years, volunteered with the fire department for 5, helped with neighborhood events, shoveled elderly neighbors' sidewalks, and done dozens of other things. But I'd forever be the snowblower guy. Could be worse, I supposed. Gabriella and I hosted Christmas dinner that year. My parents came, along with Gabriella's sister and her family. Gerald and Dorothy came over for dessert, and somehow the conversation turned to the infamous incident. "I still have nightmares sometimes," Gerald admitted. "Patricia standing in my yard with that baseball bat, screaming about conspiracies. It was terrifying." "I'm sorry you went through that," I said. "I never thought standing up about my snowblower would lead to someone having a breakdown in your front yard." "That's not on you," Dorothy insisted. "Patricia's actions were her own choice. You just refused to be bullied, which is exactly what you should have done." Gabriella's sister, who'd heard the story multiple times but never from Gerald's perspective, asked him, "Did you press charges?" "No." Once she got into anger management and the court process, it seemed like she was dealing with consequences. Adding more criminal charges wouldn't have helped anyone. The district attorney still charged her with menacing because she'd threatened people with a weapon, but I didn't push for additional property damage charges. "That was generous of you," my mom said. "It was practical," Gerald corrected. "She sold her house and moved away. She's out of our lives." What would I gain by making her legal problems worse? That had been the general attitude in Meadowbrook Hills once the dust settled. Patricia had faced consequences, reforms had been implemented, and people were ready to move forward. There was no appetite for revenge, just relief that the situation had been resolved. New Year's Eve brought the neighborhood tradition of gathering at the community center for a party. Susan gave a brief speech about the past year's accomplishments, carefully not mentioning the previous year's drama. We'd all agreed it was time to stop defining ourselves by one bad incident and start focusing on positive community building. But human nature being what it is, someone brought up the snowblower anyway. Remember when we thought having someone steal equipment during a blizzard was the craziest thing that could happen? Linda said, laughing. Now it's just a funny story we tell new neighbors. It's not that funny, I protested. It was actually pretty stressful at the time. Of course it was, Linda said. But we survived, we fixed the problems, and now it's history. That's worth celebrating. She was right. We'd faced a challenge as a community, dealt with it appropriately, and came out stronger. That was worth celebrating. As midnight approached and everyone counted down to the new year, I looked around at my neighbors and friends. This was what community was supposed to feel like. Not perfect, not without problems, but genuine. People who looked out for each other, who stood up when things went wrong, who worked together to find solutions. All because someone tried to steal a snowblower during a blizzard, and I'd made a phone call instead of just letting it happen. Sometimes the smallest actions have the biggest consequences. Sometimes standing up for what's right, even in seemingly minor situations, sets off a chain of events that changes everything. And sometimes a snowblower is just a snowblower until it becomes a symbol of resistance against petty tyranny. The clock struck midnight. Gabriella kissed me as fireworks exploded outside. Gerald raised his glass in a toast. Susan laughed at something Thomas said. The community center was full of warmth and joy and people who genuinely cared about each other. Whatever happened next year, whatever challenges we faced, I knew we'd handle them together. Because that's what real communities did. We'd learned that lesson the hard way, during a blizzard, fighting over a snowblower and the principle of the thing. And we'd never forget it.